presidential elections were held in Afghanistan on April 5, 2014, with a second round held on June 14. Incumbent President Hamid Karzai was not eligible to run due to term limits. The registration period for presidential nominations was open from September 16, 2013 until October 6, 2013. A total of 27 candidates were confirmed to be running for office. However, on October 22, Afghanistan unregistered trademark Independent Election Commission disqualified 16 of the candidates, leaving only 11 in the race. By April 2014, 3 candidates gave up the race and decided to support some of the 8 remaining candidates. Opinion polls showed Abdullah Abdullah and Ashraf Ghani as the front-runners, and indeed the results of the first-round election had Abdullah in the lead and Ghani behind him. The results of the second-round election will determine the new leader of Afghanistan. The second set of results will come after the runoff on June 14, 2 months after the first round. Preliminary results were expected on July 2 and the final result on July 22. However, widespread accusations of fraud are likely to delay these results. Either Abdullah Abdullah or Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai will be the winner, but because of electoral fraud, a winner will not be declared until August 22. The election would be the first time in Afghanistan's history that power will be democratically transferred. Procedure. On July 17, 2013, the Parliament of Afghanistan passed a pair of election laws considered crucial to holding the election on time. President Karzai signed one and was expected to sign the other quickly. The first law to be signed lays out the composition and rules for Afghanistan unregistered trademark Election Commission and a separate commission to adjudicate complaints about voter fraud and other irregularities. The other one governs how the vote will be held. Pakistan sealed its border with Afghanistan during the electoral period in order to reduce the chances of cross-border attacks. There have been reports of polling sites running out of ballot papers due to a high turnout. Candidates. A total of 27 candidates were confirmed to have submitted their nominations by Afghanistan's Independent Election Commission on October 6, 2013, the closing day of the nomination period. Abdullah Abdullah, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, leader of National Coalition of Afghanistan, presidential candidate in 2009, Dil Agha Damani, Ishaq Gailani, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, former Minister of Finance, Hashmat Ghani Ahmadzai, Qutbuddin Hilal, Qayyum Karzai, brother of current President Hamid Karzai, businessman and politician, Fazil Karim Najmi, Zalmay Rasul, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdul Rasul Saif, Baiz Militia, leader of the Wefaq Milli Party, Abdul Rahim Wardak, former Minister of Defense. However, on October 22, Afghanistan unregistered trademark Independent Election Commission disqualified 16 of the candidates, leaving only 11 in the race. The different candidates were disqualified for a number of reasons, among them were education levels, documentation and the number of required signatures. The disqualified candidates had 20 days to appeal the decision, and the Independent Election Commission was due to present the final list of confirmed candidates on November 19, 2013. On November 25, 2013, the Independent Election Commission announced the ordering of the candidate names for the election ballot as follows: declined to run, Zawar Ahmadzai, Muhammad Hanif Atma, Ali Ahmad Jalali, Zalmay Khalilzad, Fawzia Kufi, Muhammad Muhakkik, Atta Muhammad Nur, Mullah Omar, Muhammad Yunus Kanuni, Ulam Farooq Wardak, Mirwais Yassini. Campaign. On March 6, 2014, Qayyum Karzai ended his bid for the presidency, and instead announced his support for Zalmay Rasul. Due to the lateness of his announcement, Karzai's name still appeared on the ballot paper, however Karzai told supporters to vote for Rasul instead. 2 other candidates, Sada Muhammad Nadir and Abdul Rahim Wardak, did the same thing to create a strong Pashtun ticket. Debates. Tola News have hosted several debates between the presidential candidates. First debate. The first debate took place on February 4, 2014 and included 5 candidates. Abdullah Abdullah, Qayyum Karzai, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, Zalmay Rasul, and Abdul Rahim Wardak. The debate focused on the issues of security, the economy, and corruption. Second debate. The second debate took place on February 18, 2014 and included 4 candidates. Dude Sultansoy, Mohammed Nader Nariam, Hedayat Amin Arsala, and Kotbuddin Hilal. As with the first debate, the second debate focused on the issues of security, the economy, and corruption. On the issue of security, Arsala emphasized the need for better cooperation between the various Afghan security agencies. Sultansoy focused on the issue of a lack of motivation and high desertions in the Afghan security forces. Nariam emphasized the need to combat insecurity by providing better services. On the issue of peace negotiations with the Taliban, Nariam argued that certain parts of the Taliban want peace and could be compromised with. Sultansoy argued that the Taliban was a tool of foreign intelligence agencies, and that in order to marginalize the Taliban, the Afghan people needed to unite behind a unifying goal. Hilal argued that the Taliban was a diverse group, with certain members being driven by poverty, whilst others were agents of intelligence agencies. Hilal argued that the former parts could and should be negotiated with. Arsala argued that if the Taliban embraced politics, instead of violence, that they could be given a chair in the cabinet. Sultansoy also argued that corruption was resulting in poverty, and that increases in pensions and salaries could be afforded through a reduction in corruption. Arsala also focused on the issue of corruption, arguing that government administration overall must be reformed. Hilal advocated reducing corruption through a mixture of better policing and the digitizing of government records. Nariam argued that corruption was a major issue for the Afghan bureaucracy, and had increased over the past 12 years. He argued that as an issue it must be dealt with from the top down. Hilal also argued that whilst women should be educated and involved in society, this should be done within the limits of Sharia. Nariam argued that Afghan constitution and Afghan democracy had been achieved in a way in line with Islam. Sultansoy argued that Afghanistan had made great sacrifices for democracy, and that equal rights under the law must be ensured. Arsala advocated an independent, developed and Muslim Afghanistan. Third debate. The third debate took place on March 4, 2014 and included 3 candidates. Abdullah Abdullah, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, and Zalmay Rasul. The debate focused on foreign policy. On the issue of the Durand Line, both Rasul and Abdullah argued that the Afghan government alone cannot decide on the issue of the Durand Line, but that instead policy must be set according to the will of the people. Ahmadzai however argued that the issue of the Durand Line cannot be discussed if the conditions are not right. All 3 candidates expressed their support for the bilateral security agreement. On the subject of the zero option, whereby the United States would fully pull out of Afghanistan, Rasul argued that Afghanistan would still be in a position to accept international aid. Ahmadzai argued against the zero option, stating that Afghan remained dangerous, but that Afghanistan would likely be stable by the end of the decade. Abdullah attacked Karzai's opposition to the zero option, claiming that the danger of a zero option had been caused by Karzai's unbalanced and emotional decisions. All 3 candidates accused Pakistan of aiding the Taliban. Abdullah claimed that Pakistan used the Taliban as a tool for foreign policy. Rasul argued that when discussing the issue a distinction had to be made between the Pakistani government and the Pakistani people, and that the Pakistani people have been friends to the people of Afghanistan. Ahmadzai argued that extremism posed a threat to both countries, but that Afghan sovereignty had to be maintained, and that the Afghan government had to prevent Pakistan from destabilizing Afghanistan through proxies. Opinion polls. The 2014 election has been the first election in Afghanistan to make use of opinion polling. A December 2013 poll by Glevum was the first of 9 planned polls funded by the United States. The polls were to be conducted by 3 different companies, with the United States paying for them due to Afghan institutions lacking the ability and funding to conduct the polling themselves. Following the publication of a subsequent Democracy Institute poll, some Afghan electoral authorities and candidate supporters alleged the polling had been biased. As response, the United States cancelled funding for any further polling in order to avoid any perception of bias. Results. The preliminary results were announced on April 26 and were finalized on May 15. About 12 million Afghans were registered to vote in the country and about 8 million members of Afghan diaspora were also eligible to vote. Nearly two-thirds of the Afghan population were under the age of 25. No candidate secured more than the 50% of the vote, so there was a second-round runoff on June 14. Preliminary results for the second round were due on July 2, but were delayed to July 7, and final results are due July 22. The results are likely going to be delayed, causing the July 2 deadline to be missed, as the result of fraud accusations according to the Independent Election Commission's spokesperson Noor Mohammed Noor. The results are summarized below. By province. Security concerns. On April 7, 2014, a roadside bomb was detonated in the Mehrban district when a van drove over it, killing all 13 people on board. Some suspected the Taliban were responsible, though the group blamed international forces for the attack. The 2014 presidential elections is the first year Afghan national security forces have taken the lead for such an event. On June 6, 2014, candidate Abdullah Abdullah narrowly survived an assassination attempt. In the attack, suicide bombers targeted his armored car, severely damaging the vehicle and killed 3 of his bodyguards as well as 3 bystanders. Abdullah escaped largely unscathed, strongly condemning the attack while commenting, "The best response to this conspiracy is to go to vote on election day." No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, though the Taliban has previously threatened to violently disrupt the electoral process. On July 1, 2014, Afghan security forces seized weapons, ammunition and explosives and killed around 27 Taliban during operations in Kunar, Kunduz, Badakhshan, Balkh, Zabul and Helmand provinces. The next day, a suicide bomber riding a bicycle targeted a vehicle of the Afghan National Army at around 6:30 am in which 14 people, including civilians, were killed. The Afghan Intelligence National Directorate of Security Chief, Rahmatullah Nabil accused Pakistan's ISI and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps of escalating clashes in the Helmand province. The Taliban is said to have gathered hundreds of fighters in a bid of overtaking this region, amidst the U.S. withdrawal. Allegations of fraud. In July, certain allegations regarding fraudulent practices in the voting process emerged. The European Union sent 6 observers in Kabul, Balkh and Herat provinces. Thijs Berman, head of the EU Election Assessment Team, called for an in-depth review of the electoral fraud claims and said that necessary steps will be taken to clean it. Abdullah accused President Hamid Karzai of conspiring in the rigging of the elections. References. External links: Radio France International in English.